بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وبعد. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout the Quran speaks about various injunctions which we are reminded of. From our prayer, to giving zakah, to upholding taqwa, to treating people fairly, kindly. These are things that are often repeated in the Quran. The one injunction, however, that's repeated in practice, but only mentioned once in the Quran, is the injunction of fasting, Ramadan. Why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only mentions it once? Because Ramadan is such a fascinating, amazing practice, worship, that we don't need much pushing to get engaged in. We see the entire community fasting, we feel motivated. We see our families fasting, we feel motivated. We feel this sense of uniqueness, so we feel motivated. So the month of Ramadan is indeed something special and something that takes us out of our routine, our normalcy, and we now begin to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala different in comparison to the remainder of the year. However, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says quite emphatically and clearly, رُبَّ صَائِمٍ لَيْسَ لَهُ مِنْ صِيَامِهِ إِلَّا الْجُوعِ, that there are many people who will be fasting in the month of Ramadan, but the only benefit they will derive from their fasting is hunger. Let me repeat that again. Fasting in the month of Ramadan is a very rewarding, meritorious action, but the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam reminds us that there will be some people who will fast in the month of Ramadan, exert themselves, remain hungry, away from their spouses, without any drink, yet the only benefit that they will receive is إِلَّا الْجُوعِ, is their hunger and deprivation. Why is this the case? The ulama explain a number of reasons, primarily because a person is unmindful of the actions that they're doing while they're fasting. That I'm fasting, yet I am engaged in ghibah. I'm fasting, yet I'm engaged in haram. I'm fasting, yet I'm doing what is unlawful. That's one thing that ruins my fasting. But another thing that ruins my fasting is my ignorance and my heedlessness regarding what breaks my fast. So during the morning, I don't know that drinking water breaks my fast. So every time I'm fasting, I'm drinking water and I'm continuing fasting under the assumption that I'm getting rewarded, but because of my ignorance, my fast is not being accepted to begin with. Because of which it is very important that we remind ourselves constantly, what are those things that make my fast valid, and what are those things that render my fast null and void? With that in mind, inshallah, we're going to carry on with the second session of fasting. Last week, we spoke about the different types of fasting: fard, wajib, nafil, sunnah, haram. Then we spoke about the importance of niyyah, intention. We spoke about the different types of the fasting, from suhoor to imsak to iftar. Then we spoke about how important it is that we have suhoor, we ensure that we do imsak properly, and we do not forget about our iftar. Now we're going to go into a section which is perhaps the most important part of our fasting, is what are those things that break my fast? People often ask this question, what are those things that render my fast null and void? So there are a number of things, and inshallah we're going to go through the list. Number one, eating and drinking. Eating and drinking nullifies my fast. So if I intentionally eat food, intentionally drink water, these things will break my fast. This is something we are all aware of. But the one thing that we often forget is, one is to eat intentionally and one is to eat forgetfully. If, hypothetically speaking, I am fasting and in the middle of the day I completely forget that I am fasting, and then I eat something or I drink something, that is forgiven. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, forgetfulness. One is intentional and one is forgetful. So let's say, for instance, there's a plate of food in front of me. I forget that I am fasting and I eat. My fasting will not break. So what is the first thing? Forgetful. The second thing is accidental. There's a difference between forgetfully and accidentally. I'll give you an example. Let's say, for instance, I'm making wudu and I'm gargling water in my mouth. And as I'm gargling, I know that I'm fasting, but accidentally I swallow the water. Did I remember that I was fasting? Yes. But did I still drink the water? Yes. That is a mistake. When a person does a mistake knowingly, meaning knowing that they're fasting, their fast will break. But if you eat or drink or have intimate relations, unknowingly, forgetting that you're fasting, your fast will not break. So I'm going to give 3 situations and I want to see how everybody will respond over here. Situation number 1. I go to work, I'm feeling thirsty, I see a bottle of water and I say, you know what, I'm thirsty, I'm going to drink, and I intentionally drink and I remember that I'm fasting. Will my fast break? Yes. Okay, situation number 2. I walk inside of the office and there's a party which I was unaware of, and I'm speaking to people and I completely forget that I'm fasting that day, and somebody offers me some coffee to drink and I end up drinking the coffee. Will my fast break? No, my fast will not break. Situation number 3. I'm taking a shower, and as I'm taking a shower, I face the water, the shower head, and I remember I'm fasting and the water enters my mouth and I swallow that water. Will my fast break? Yes, because why? I knew that I was fasting, although it was a mistake. So these are the 3 situations in terms of eating, drinking, whether it's intentionally, whether it's forgetfully, or whether it's mistakenly. People often don't make mistakes except when they're doing wudu. That's why it's very important that we're cautious when we're making wudu. But for the most part, we either fall into forgetfulness, that we forget that we're fasting, or we intentionally do it for whatever reason. However, there are certain things which are excluded. There are certain things which are overlooked. So number 1, let's say for instance I make wudu, I gargle the water and I spit the water out. But there are some traces of water remaining in my mouth. There's no problem in that water. I don't need to sit there with a towel and dry my tongue. No, that's extreme. Once you gargle and you let it out, whatever remains in your mouth is fine. However, this is important. I just had my suhoor. And I have all this food stuck in between my teeth. And I come for Fajr Salah and I begin eating whatever is in between my teeth. Now what happens? If the amount that I am eating is the size of a chickpea, we all know how much is a chickpea. You know, a chickpea, if it is that much, my fast will break. But if it's something small, it's overlooked, but we should try our best to clean our mouths by rinsing or gargling or brushing our teeth before we begin our fast. Is that clear? If we have food remaining in our teeth, if the amount is the size of a chickpea, then your fast will break if you swallow that amount. You know, saving that for later is not going to make a difference. Okay, so that's if you have some water left over. What if I'm using a miswak? Some people, they use miswak. So there is some moisture inside of the miswak. Will that break my fast? No, that will not break my fast because it's a very negligible amount. Number 3, if I'm in traffic and there's a lot of construction going on and you have this smog or dust, and I don't intentionally go there, but it happens to come my way, it's fine. That does not break my fast. So some things are overlooked. Another thing that's overlooked for the mothers, when they're cooking, the question is, can they taste the food? You know, sometimes they want to check whether there is salt in the food, enough salt, not enough salt. Are they allowed to taste it? It doesn't break their fast, and if they just taste very little and they spit it out, it doesn't break your fast. But you're not supposed to take an actual amount. Although the ulama say, unless it's necessary, if you're an expert chef, you know how much you need to take, it's fine. But if the person's a new chef and they're learning and they're scared that it's going to ruin the whole meal, trying a little bit is fine, it's not a problem, it doesn't break your fast. Remember, tasting versus eating, 2 very different concepts. Is that clear? Is that understood? Okay, the next situation, vomiting. Oftentimes we get sick while we're fasting, and now we vomit. Does vomiting break my fast or not? There are only 2 situations where vomit will break your fasting. There are 2 situations where vomiting will break your fasting. How many? Two situations. Number one, when a person intentionally, meaning I induce myself and I vomit a mouthful. Let's say for instance, I'm feeling very uncomfortable. And what I do is I induce my vomit and it's an entire mouthful. That situation, number one, my fast will break. So if I induce the fast but only a small amount comes, my fast will not break. Situation number one, you induce the vomit and it's a mouthful. Number two, no matter how I vomit, I swallow the vomit back inside. So if it's a full mouth, so the vomit's about to come out, I don't let it come out, I swallow it back inside, my fast will break. Only two situations. Situation number one, I induce the vomit and it's a mouthful. And situation number two, it's a mouthful and I intentionally take it back inside. Any other circumstance of vomit will not break my fast. For instance, I induce the fast and only a small amount comes out. Or number two, I feel nauseous and randomly a full mouth of vomit comes out, but I don't do it intentionally. My fast does not break. Number three, a little bit of vomit comes out and it goes back inside. My fast does not break. Does that make sense? So let me make this clear again. Let me give you a few situations. Let's see how you respond to this. I'm in work and all of a sudden somebody brings something spoiled and I start to feel nauseous, and from my inside all this vomit comes out more than a mouthful. Does my fast break or not? No, it doesn't break. Why? Because I have not intentionally taken it out. Number two, I'm inside of the place, I'm feeling really uncomfortable, so what I tell myself is I'm going to induce it. I put my finger inside and I let an entire mouthful come out. Will my fast break? Yes, my fast will break. Number three, I'm fasting and then all of a sudden I'm feeling uncomfortable. I induce the fast, but only a small amount comes out. Will my fast break? No. Why? Because it's only a small amount. Last situation. Let's say for instance, I just had suhoor and I have acid reflux. And it feels really uncomfortable and I feel the vomit over here. It's going in, it's going out, it's going in. A lot of brothers and sisters suffer from this. Does my fast break? No. Why? Because it's a very negligible amount. Okay? So that's with regards to vomiting and how that will break your fast. Okay, this is the next situation. Again, before I get to this, I feel this is a very important caveat and introduction I need to make. That we learn from a number of ahadith. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam says, two types of people will not benefit from knowledge. Two types of people will not benefit from knowledge. Number one, mutakabbir. Number two, mustahyi. Two types of people. Who are they? Number one, the person who is arrogant. He thinks to himself that, you know what, I don't need this knowledge. I'm not going to go and study. That person will never benefit from knowledge. But number two, mustahyi, the person who is shy, the person who is shameful and feels, I'm too shy to ask these questions. When it comes down to the matters of the deen, there's no such thing as being shy. If we have very explicit questions, we need to ask the relevant scholars and get our answers. Shyness does not apply to my deen and me getting knowledge about Islam. Okay, I feel like that's very important because oftentimes I've even had some complaints that I would be speaking to the brothers about some rulings and others would come and complain that, listen, you shouldn't talk about these things, they're maybe inappropriate, who knows how people... No, when it comes down to matters of deen, when it's regarding our religion, we need to educate ourselves, yes, in a mature fashion, without being immature about it. Nonetheless, the third thing that breaks our fast is having an intimate relationship with our spouse. When a person is intimate with their spouse, their fast will break. But the question here oftentimes people ask is, okay, what is it that breaks my fast? If a person kisses their spouse, or if a person caresses and fondles his or her spouse, will the fasting break or not? No. When we're talking about being intimate, what breaks the fast is one of two things. Number one, when there is actual penetration. When there is actual penetration, then the fasting will break, number one. And number two, when a person ejaculates in the process. Again, like I said, we do not have to have shyness and shamefulness when we're talking about the rulings of religion. This is to educate ourselves. When a person is intimate with their spouse,
If a person does not have penetration, number one, or number two, the person does not ejaculate, the fasting does not break. This is very important for us to know, because oftentimes people are under the misunderstanding that anything a person does with their spouse will immediately break their fast. Is it encouraged that a person does those actions? No, you shouldn't do that, because it can lead one thing to another, and before you know it, you fall into the actual deed. But in terms of what breaks your fast, until a person doesn't have an emission of the fluids, and emission of the fluids, again, to be a bit more specific, you have two types of fluids. You have the pre-fluids and you have the actual fluids. When the actual emission of the fluids happens, then the fast will break. If it's pre-seminal fluids, it will not break the fast. Again, I'm just going to run through this quickly, just so that we're aware of these ahkam. Oftentimes, new couples get married, they're told things which may not be correct, or people who are more senior in their relationships, they're not aware of this. Anything else, whether it is touching, whether it is caressing, whether it is talking, this does not break the fast. Which brings us to the next question. What if a person kisses their spouse? What happens? If a person kisses their spouse and there is an exchange of saliva, if there is an exchange of saliva, that can lead to the fast breaking. If there is no exchange of saliva, the fast will not break. Again, if a person kisses their spouse, if there's an exchange of saliva, if some of the spouse's saliva comes into that person's mouth and that person takes it in, the fast will break. If a person does not do that, the fast will not break. And last but not least, this is something, again, it's unfortunately our youth have this weakness, and oftentimes they've fallen into a very bad habit that we may be aware of, and it's our responsibility to educate our community about this. If a teenager or if a person, what the term is, I can't think of an alternative, but I'll use the term, if a person masturbates. If a person masturbates, that will break the fast. We should be aware of that, and we need to educate our children about that. Oftentimes people have certain bad habits, things that they should not be doing, but it's a weakness nonetheless. When a person engages in that form of action, it will break their fast, and we should be aware of it, and we should educate our families about it. Okay, so that is in regards to intimacy. Hopefully everybody's aware of this. If anybody has more specific questions, inshallah you can ask afterwards. Okay, the next discussion is, and this is very important, and we need to understand the difference between these two things. Qada, qaza, or however we say it, and kafara. Qada and kafara. Two things. One is to make up a fast, and one is to give a penalty, a kafara for the fast. These are two very different things, and there are two different penalties. Okay, kafara is a penalty which we'll do later on. It's when a person fasts 60 days consecutively or has to feed a number of people. That's a penalty, and qada is to make up the fasts. A qada will be done in every circumstance when I do not fast. If I did not fast, whether it's for a medical reason, if I did not, and obviously later on I'm able to do so, if I did not fast for a medical reason, or I did not fast because I'm traveling, or I did not fast because I broke my fast, whatever the circumstance is, I have to do qada and repeat that fast in a different day. The second thing is kafara, which is a penalty. The penalty of kafara is only necessary when a person intentionally breaks their fast. Kafara is only necessary when a person intentionally breaks their fast in the month of Ramadan. Very important. If outside of the month of Ramadan, even if it's my qada or whatnot, I break my fast, there's no kafara. It's only when I break my fast intentionally in the month of Ramadan is kafara necessary. Is that clear? Even if I have kafara, I still have to do qada. Don't forget that. Oftentimes we forget that only kafara. No, we have the qada to do, and then you have a kafara, which is an added penalty. Okay, what is kafara? Kafara, maybe we're all aware of. Kafara is a penalty that if intentionally I break my fast, I have to fast 60 days consecutively. Urdu, you say pe dar pe. In Arabic, you say mutatabi'at, mutataliyat. One after the other. If I am fasting, it has to be one after the other. Meaning, one day I'm fasting and I tell myself, you know what, forget about fasting, I'm tired of this. And I intentionally drink something, na'udhu billah. I now have to give a penalty of fasting 60 days consecutively. If I fasted 30 days and one day I let go, I have to start again from the beginning and I have to do all 60 days. Is that clear? One after the other. That's if I have the physical ability of fasting 60 days. If I do not have the physical ability of fasting 60 days, then I have to feed 60 individuals. Let's say, for instance, I'm a bit old and in the month of Ramadan, I'm able to fast. But in the past, I've broken so many fasts. And right now, I'm not able to fast anymore. I can't do my kafara. What do? I have to do what we call feeding, fidya. You have to feed 60 poor people. It can be locally, it can be back home. However you want to do it, you have to give 2 meals to 60 people. Or if you want, you can give one person 2 meals for 60 days. However you want to do it, but that is only when you are not able to fast. Oftentimes we fool ourselves and we say, oh, you know what, I can't fast, I'm a bit busy, I'm a bit tired. No, physically if the doctor says you cannot fast, then you do kafara like that. Is that clear? Okay, I'm gonna stop here. I know there's a lot to digest. We do have a few more important discussions which we will conclude with next week. I'm going to just recap what we covered today. The first thing is what breaks our fast? Eating and drinking. I mentioned one is intentional, one is forgetful, and one is mistaken. Intentionally your fast breaks, mistakenly your fast breaks, but forgetfully your fast does not break. Then we spoke about the different types of vomiting and the 2 scenarios where that will break your fast. And number 3, we spoke about intimacy and what types of being intimate with the person's family will the fast break. We talked about the 2 types, qada and kafara. When is qada necessary? One is kafara necessary. And what is kafara? When intentionally I break my fast, I have to fast 60 days consecutively. And if I broke it forgetfully, obviously I do not have to make it up. If I cannot fast, then we will need to feed 60 people. The last section, I would have carried on, but I know this is a lot of information. I think we're going to need to digest it, understand it, and swallow it first. The next week, inshallah, it's a very important conversation. It's about medical items. A lot of people ask if I take an anesthesia pump, if I take an asthma pump, or if I take insulin, or if I take some medicine, will my fast break? A lot of people ask, when I go to the doctor, the dentist, will that break my fast or not? Some people are excused if I'm traveling, if a mother is pregnant. Some people are sick, and there are the makruh things as well. There's a lot of information. I remember last year, it took us about 4 or 5 weeks to do it. I know I don't want to take too long at the same time. At the same time, I want people to digest it. So hopefully next week, we will try our best to conclude. It is the last week before Ramadan, inshallah. With that, if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. Yes? Yes? Okay, very important question. If I have a miswak that has taste in it, will that break my fast or not? If the taste is natural, there's nothing wrong with it. Some miswaks have a natural taste to it. Natural tastes are fine. If it's added to it, when I add it to it and I swallow it, that will break my fast. So a lot of times in the miswak, they'll say natural flavors. Other times they'll say artificial flavors, like bubblegum flavor, ajib gharib flavors that they have. If I actually swallow that, my fast will break. Okay, toothpaste we're gonna get to later on, but if I brush my teeth and nothing goes down my throat, I just keep it in my mouth and I swallow it, my fast will not break. But it's very tricky. You have to make sure that you use a very small amount, and you make sure not a single drop also goes into your mouth, down your throat, because if it does, your fast will break. That's why they encourage you do it before you start your fast. But if I happen to brush my teeth, my fast will not break. And if a person is sick, he's excused. If, let's say for instance, I'm feeling very nauseous and I say I need to take a Tylenol, I need to eat something. If I eat it in that situation, all I need to do now is just do qada of 1 day. The only time I have kafara if I do it intentionally and I have no excuse, without any excuse. If a person breaks their fast, the ulama explain you should carry on fasting like the rest of the people, just so that you keep the posture going. But if you're ill and you can't fast, then it's fine. But if you recover from it, or I just need to take a pill really quickly, I should carry on fasting, although in reality my fast is already broken. Sorry? Yeah? If a person has a wet dream or ejaculates in their sleep, their fasting does not break. It has to be done intentionally in order for the fast to break. A person has to physically masturbate in order for it to break, or he has to penetrate in the relationship with his wife. So whether it's done with a person's spouse or it's done independently by the person himself, if ejaculation takes place with his own action, then the fasting will break. If for, the fuqaha in the books of fiqh, they give the example, a person picks up something very heavy and it's not in his control, but things come out, that's not his problem, it's not his fault, his fast will not break. It's intentionally when he does it with the intention of lust. Whether he does it himself or it's with his spouse, the fasting will break. If a person engages in relationships with their spouse and he's not in a state of purity and the fasting begins, your fasting is still valid. Your fasting is valid. You do not need to get out of the state of impurity for your fasting to be valid, but obviously you have to pray Fajr still, so that's why you need to take a shower. Yes? So basically, let's say for instance, it's the month of Ramadan, and I have no excuse, and I see some really cold water, and I say, you know what, I'm going to drink it, and I drink it intentionally. My fast is broken. Now I have to fast 60 days consecutively. That's my penalty, but I still have to make up this fast. This 1 day of qada I also have to make. So it's 61 in total. One is that day that I broke, I have to make that up. I can do that anytime. And there's no need for a sequence for that 1 day. But then I have the penalty of kafara, which is 60 days consecutively, which I need to do. Does that make sense? So that 1 day I can do it anytime, but those 60 days I have to do it one after the other. If I mistakenly eat something, I only have qada, there's no kafara. Forgetfully and mistakenly the difference is whether you remember you're fasting or not. If you are conscious of the fact that you're fasting and the water goes in, your fast breaks. You just have a qada. But if I forget that I'm fasting and then I eat, my fast does not break. The difference is whether I'm aware and conscious of me fasting. Yes? Yeah. One qada, that's it, one. No kafara. Kafara is when you intentionally do it without an excuse, no excuse. Yes? No, there is no kafara outside of the month of Ramadan. Kafara is only in the month of Ramadan. Yes, but accidental, forgetful, all of that applies to my nafil fasting as well. The issue of kafara and qada, if I break my nafil fast, according to many ulama, you have to do qada. Some ulama say you don't. But the kafara penalty is only with the month of Ramadan. Everything else, whether I'm excused, whether it's forgetful, whether it's vomit, they all apply to all forms of fasting. All the fastings. And kafara is only in the month of Ramadan if I intentionally break my fast. If I say, for instance, I miss my 1 day in the month of Ramadan and I'm doing qada. And let's say Ramadan is done in September, I'm doing my qada. And I intentionally break my fast, still too there's no kafara. Kafara can only happen when I intentionally break my fast in the month of Ramadan. Any other questions? Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You should, it's still in your mouth, you should spit that food out. Your fast is still fine. This brings us to a very important question people often ask. If I see someone eating food, and that person doesn't know they're fasting, should I interrupt that person or not? Let's say, for instance, I come inside of my house and my child, he just started fasting, he's getting used to it, he's a teenager, and he starts eating food. Should I stop him from eating or not? Because he could be doing it forgetfully. The ulama explain that if the person is so hungry that they're going to collapse or they're going to die, which inshallah isn't our case, if that's the situation, you don't disturb them. But if you feel the person just forgetfully doing it, then you very wisely go there and you try to put your hand on the person's hand so that they don't eat a morsel. Because what can happen is you're going to remind that person, he's going to remember, but he's going to continue eating anyways. So what you do is you try to prevent that person from eating if you feel that the person is forgetfully doing it. But again, you have to do it with a lot of wisdom in case the person chokes, eats it by accident. Maybe you don't understand that person's circumstance. He may be excused. She may have a medical reason. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Any other questions? Sorry? Yeah. If there's like saliva accumulating in my mouth, there's no problem with that. That's fine. Yeah, there's no problem with any saliva accumulating in my mouth if I swallow it. Yes, some ulama say that you shouldn't be sitting over there waiting for a full mouth and you drink it so that your mouth gets moist. They mention it in the books of fiqh because that's kind of like cheating, but normal circumstances, there's nothing wrong with it. Sorry? Intention, okay, this is a very important question. MashaAllah, jazakallah khair. Let's say for instance tomorrow is fasting and I have an exam. This is not an excuse not to fast. It's not an excuse, but I tell myself, I'm weak, I'm not going to fast. I have an exam, I have my SATs or whatever exam, and I'm not going to fast. If I intentionally do not fast, there's only qada, there's no kafara. Kafara is only when I intentionally break my fast without an excuse. If I do not begin my fast at all, there's only qada. Again, that's not an excuse just because I have an exam, because for the next ulama, like a lot of people are asking this question. I had a Ramadan program in Plano the other day, and one high schooler asked the question that, oh look, we're going to have all these exams, what do we do? And then I told him that, look, for the next 30 years, Ramadan is going to happen in the school year. At least for the next 30 years, Ramadan is going to happen in the school year. So we better get used to it from now, that how we're going to balance our school life with our fasting. And that's a challenge, but as Muslims, we get more reward for the difficulty, and inshallah, we can speak to our youth about that. Yes? Yeah. That does not break your fast. The taste of the toothbrush does not break your fast. Only if you swallow the toothpaste, your fast will break. There's nothing wrong with it as long as it does not go past your throat. Because you have to understand, there's a difference between the taste of something that is edible and the taste of something which is non-edible. If I go around tasting things which are edible, my fast will become makruh. It won't break, it will become disliked. But if I taste something which is non-edible, it's not even disliked. And toothbrush is one example. Mufti Rada al-Haq from Binuri Town, that's the fatwa that he gives, and I feel it's more relevant and easy for many people today. So again, if you gargle and you spit it out, whatever remains, there's nothing wrong with that, but you have to spit out to the best of your ability. Inshallah. Is that it? Inshallah, next week is a very important session. I do encourage everybody to participate. It's going to be about medical items. And I know many people have questions, inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward everybody. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq of educating ourselves. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to go see the month of Ramadan. Subhanallah wa bihamdik, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.